Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2020. It is the 10 o'clock hour. The Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all other special assessment and taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. Kylie, would you take roll?
Supervisor Howard?
Present.
Supervisor Cowan?
Here.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Here.
Chair Hemmingson?
Here. At this time, we're going to take a moment of reflection. And now, if you'll all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Introduction of new employees. Do we have any? Seeing none, we'll move on. County Council, actions from closed session.
No reportable action.
Thank you. At this time, I would request any deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of the county, subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Are there any such items? Seeing none, we'll move on to receive brief reports or announcements, Del Norte programs, projects, progress by two committees, goal committees, and we'll start with Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is going to be fairly short this morning. My files got corrupted just this morning, so I'm going to do a brief summary. After our last meeting, I attended the Comprehensive Economic Development Forum with Supervisors Cowan, Gitlin, and Howard. Met with the constituents on Temple and Railroad who are concerned about all of the blight in that area, and luckily we got the blight cleaned up on Temple, which owe a lot of credit to Supervisor Gitlin for that. We had a candidate forum last night, which was jam-packed at the Methodist Church, and a lot of good questions and answers. Had a meeting in Klamath with the Klamath RV. They complained about the river taking a lot of their area, and they've lost a lot of ground to the river impending on their land. I attended the NRA dinner. That was also a jam-packed item. And very well attended, and also I attended the TANF chamber mixer last week. And that is my truncated report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Started out the week after the last board meeting with a discussion with Don Gillespie and Tom Wheeler from Friends and Epic on Highway 197, 199 issues and some ongoing discussions. Also attended a special meeting of the Del Norte Local Transportation Commission to discuss the future of Sunset Circle and a project that the city has been working on. Also met with the Toloadini Nation at the bequest of their council, specific to a project that we're working on with the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority to try to site a northern transfer station somewhere in the Smith River area. Attended a meeting of the Tri-Agency Economic Development Authority. Also, as Supervisor Berkowitz mentioned, attended the review of the draft of the comprehensive economic development strategy that both the city and the county are participating in and paying for. This draft document will hopefully set some goals and groundwork for the next 5 years to apply for federal dollars available to both the city and the county. Spoke with Kevin Schaefer, Chief of Fisheries for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, on the Heritage Trout Letter that the county board approved and sent off last month. Also attended the filming that the city helped to put together, and great job on the hometown makeover in downtown Crescent City. Excellent job to the city, and wish all of us the best of luck in trying to get HGD TV here to help do a hometown makeover of our community. Attended another Del Norte County Transportation Commission, where we reviewed our overall work plan for the 2020 period of time, and then also discussed at great length some studies that we've been working on for Elk Valley Crossroad and Highway 199. As you're aware of, and we've discussed over the last several years, that intersection of the highway at Elk Valley Crossroad has been extremely deadly at times, but also to property. And Caltrans has refused to a certain extent to do any further work at that intersection. The Del Norte Local Transportation Commission, along with our partners, have started a study at that location, and the initial results of that study indicate a collision rate 8 times higher than the state average at that intersection, which is 6 times higher than the Caltrans is reporting. We're now determining, based on that data that our consultant has come up with, where Caltrans differs and where the difference is from our consultants. But what we do know is that that period of time that we did analyze, which was a 10-year period, is quite significant for that area of highway, and that we do need Caltrans' undivided attention when addressing collision concerns at this location for fear of life and property. Spoke to Kevin O'Donnell about a change in Council General for San Francisco that will be coming. Actually, I believe it took place yesterday. He's with the Japanese consulate in San Francisco. Also attended the Sierra Cascade Logging Conference in Redding on Friday last week, and those festivities to raise money for children's scholarships that go into forestry type programs. At the event, over $200,000 was raised, and one of the largest items auctioned off, believe it or not, was a hat that was signed by Donald Trump that was brought by Congressman LaMalfa that went for $25,000. It was quite an impressive amount of money spent. And then as our True North Committee organized the candidates forum last night, a very well put on event. It was great to see all the candidates, including our current supervisors, in discussion with our community about the priorities not only for communities but for their districts, and it was very well put on. I got to compliment True North about running one of the best candidate forums here in our community. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Gitlin.
Yes, thank you. As you've already heard mention about the Comprehensive Economic Development Report, we also attended that. And this is a very interesting document. It covers a 5-year period, present day, 2019, when they were looking at this, to 2024. So there are many facets to this economic report, the least of which is the availability of grant funding. This document, when it's finalized, it's a draft version right now, will provide a necessary tool. Job growth is expected to modestly rise from about 8,300 jobs right now to a little bit more than 8,600. It's very modest, but it's something that we should be aware of in terms of where our future economic development is going to come from the employees, or is it going to come from the outside? Challenges remain roads, ingress and egress, very modest population growth, and private sector remains about the same. The county's largest demographic group remains the seniors, which is about 23% of the population. This senior population will require appropriate housing and health care needs, which brings Sutter Coast Hospital into the picture as a partner in how we're going to deal with this growing demographic of seniors in our population. Government employment stays about the same. Actually, it dipped a little bit. It's about 30% of our workforce, and the continued airport growth is anticipated. SEDS draft is an ongoing living document, and it is subject to community input. Also, you heard that our local transportation met in special meeting January 28th when the commission approved this $160,000 increase for the city of Crescent City for the third phase of the Sunset Circle project. This follows Assembly Bill/Law 1358 and shifts the state's mode share of single passenger cars to the more active forms of transportation, which includes public transportation, bicycles, and walking as part of the original $640,000, and now it's an $800,000 active transportation program. I participated in a teleconference call on electronic data share from the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. CDCR has introduced this protocol and how it will disseminate behavioral, psychiatric, and physical health information to the counties as inmates are released on parole and then ultimately to probation and perhaps serving the remainder of their sentences within our county jail. This protocol, again, is part of the ongoing Assembly Bill/Law 109 on realignment of state funds. Inmates released will return to their home counties, and the impact of inmates released in Del Norte County is expected to be fairly modest. I participated in the first of two community HGTV events, kind of an exciting opportunity that lies before the city in applying for an award, an HGTV award, to renovate a portion of downtown. The rally occurred last week at the harbor and loosely organized for the larger event at the Fountain downtown a week ago. Municipal candidates must be a city of less than 30,000 residents, and I'm very excited to see that Crescent City has applied for this award. No information on the announcement of the winner, but Crescent City, I believe, has an excellent chance to be the winner of this city makeover. The Department of Agriculture and Animal Shelter is up and running again, back to normal, I'm happy to tell you. Last month, the shelter was forced to cut its operations and temporarily cease adoption services due to a series of canine diseases brought in by stray dogs. A big thank you and recognition to all the volunteers who helped staff sanitize and stabilize the shelter. Canine adoptions have resumed. And as Supervisor Berkowitz mentioned about the cleanup on Temple Street, south of State Street, where a long-term illegal campsite has been situated, it has now been vacated and most of the trash has been removed. This was quite an effort, and appropriate credit is directed to our Sheriff's Department. Thank you, Sheriff Apperson, Code Enforcement, and County Building and Maintenance. There's some additional cleanup necessary, and our Take a Bite Out of Blight volunteers will become cleaning that, organizing that event at the end of this month, probably Saturday, February 29th, weather pending. That's my report.
Supervisor Cowan.
Thank you. After our last meeting, I had a meeting with Daphne Lambert from Del Norte Mission Possible to discuss potential funders and grant applications that they're submitting. Had a meeting with Mitch Hanna from Sutter Coast Hospital and CAO Serena to discuss inmate medical needs at our jail. Attended the SEDS workshop, as you have already heard about. Had a conference call with Senator McGuire to talk about HAP funds and the timing on all that, as well as some other things around the county. Had a meeting with Ellie from Sutter Coast Hospital, Tamara Layton and Daphne from Del Norte Mission Possible to go over their 5-year budget projections for the shelter. That's obviously going to go along with the grants and the potential funding that we're doing to finally finish up this project and get that 24-hour shelter open. I was interviewed by both Paul Kritz from KPUG and our very own Jessica here from Wild Rivers Outpost. Had a behavioral health meeting, which is formerly known as mental health. We have now changed it, or it was a year ago, I guess it's been the name change. Had our quarterly last chance grade stakeholders group meeting. We meet quarterly, as I said, and it's an all-day affair, and we discuss everything last chance regarding the alternate routes, going over all the different geotechnical studies, the analysis, just everything it's been going on for the last few years. We go through everything so that we can intelligently choose that alternate route ultimately. The good news is, we've all talked about the 2039 end date, and no one likes it. And I can honestly tell you that by June of this year, that date will be changed and will be announced. So that is good news. Attended the Republican Women's Luncheon. We had a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting. Had a conference call with Carrie Lindecker out of the Senator's office last night briefly. Participated in the forum last night. Thank you, True North. It was very well attended and very much needed. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as was mentioned earlier, we did have a special local transportation commission meeting that I attended. I won't go into that since it's already been taken care of. Supervisor Howard said we had a meeting on the 199, 197 corridor with stakeholders. I did agenda review. We had our regular local transportation commission meeting. And as Supervisor Cowan was just discussing the last chance grade stakeholders group meeting, the Caltrans has hired their consultant, their environmental group that are going to get us through these next phases of this process. It's a considerable amount of money that they're spending on these people, and that's why we're going to get a new date in June. They're going to update us on how quickly they think they can get this project moving. It has a lot to do. There's some things that we have to wait on. The drilling, the drilling is not going to be done or maybe even started until September. Hopefully will be done sometime either before or just right after the first of the year. And then there has to be some monitoring of those test holes to see how things are moving and where they're going. So we're hopeful that we will get some movement. Hopefully we won't get some movement, how about that, on these test holes. But we're hoping to shorten the timeline considerably on the construction project. This will determine what alternate route these drillings and all the environmental stuff will ultimately determine the route that the stakeholders group and Caltrans and the other groups that are involved. Hopefully we'll all be moving in the same direction, and that will happen fairly quickly. I had a whale working group pre-risk assessment call, and then the next day had a whale working group risk assessment call on the whale entanglement risks, which were determined to be very low, so the season will continue on. And as was mentioned, I had a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting and had a few constituent calls and concerns that I took care of, and I'm still working on some of the other ones. And that was it for me. So we are going to move on to the consent agenda at this time, and I will accept comments from members of the public at this time regarding matters on the consent agenda items only. Is there any public comment on those items? Seeing no public comment.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Kylie, would you please poll the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Thank you. So we will move on to budget transfers. We'll move on to budget transfers. Looking for a motion. Any public comment on the budget transfers?
Move to approve budget transfers 02-01, 02-02, 02-03, 02-04, 02-05, 02-06 and 02-09. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any comments from board members? Kylie, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Well, we will move on to legislative and budget issues. Item number 24, approve and authorize the chair to sign a letter of support for the development of the North State Public Safety Training Center being proposed by the city of Yuba City.
Make a motion to approve such letter moving forward.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, then we'll bring it back to the board. Kylie, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, item number 25, approve and authorize the chair to sign and send a comment letter to the California Fish and Game Commission in support of the regulations to increase the elk tag quota in the Northwest Hunt Zone as requested by myself and Supervisor Howard, and I have been working hand in hand with this. This is something that was a clerical error made by the Fish and Game Commission, or the Department of Fish and Wildlife last year, and is being rectified. They were supposed to be an increase in 60 elk tags, and we got 20, and this is the increase in 40 more that we're supporting. Supervisor Howard, anything to add?
Nothing to add at this time.
Thanks. So I would entertain a motion. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back and I guess all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. And I guess I didn't schedule very well today because we're running a little ahead of ourselves. Am I missing anything, Kylie? Okay, we're gonna stand down for just a few minutes here until our first timed item, which will be at 10:25. So hang tight. Jay, you got any updates you want to give us? Something you're working on?
I would update the Board of Supervisors that at the request of True North, I did meet with them last week for about an hour and a half to go over their plans and their goals in regards to the homeless issue in the county. And they have a number of different things in their sights that they're working towards, including tiny houses and integration with services. They asked me to give them an overview of what I do, and so we talked for quite some time, an hour and a half or so, over all the different programs and departments and things like that the county actually, the basic services that we provide on a daily basis, and all of the good work that's done in regards to the homeless through Health and Human Services, and what the board has brought forward over the last year or so. And so they align very well, and I think that from what I heard and what we talked about and what the board and board members are doing right now, they align well to the point that with proper funding, those goals will come to pass. Finding property is one of those hurdles that we have to all overcome at this point to see where something might be feasible.
In their discussions with the tiny houses, was there any talk about kind of replicating what Hope Village?
Exactly that.
Is that what
yes.
they're, okay.
And they've been in touch with them and a couple other advocates that have been successful. So, in talking with them, it's encouraging that there's some things on the horizon that may come to pass with, like I say, proper funding and
Right.
planning.
Cool. That's good. Okay, perfect. Okay, it is 10:25, and I'm going to open up public comment period. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of this board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. You will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment?
Linda Sutter County. First off, I'd like to say, Ms. Cowan, you did very well last night at the forum. I did tape it live on Facebook, so there were comments during the live forum and still today throughout Facebook media. As far as the Elk Valley intersection, one of the things I noticed is Hiuchi Bridge, where 197, 199 are together, have two big streetlights out there. And I don't know why we've never had streetlights out here to help for people to see. Not that that's going to help the problem, but it might. Lastly, on January 29th, I submitted a 5-page report to FPPC, a complaint against 3 supervisors. And there were 30 pages of documents to support what I was saying. This is in regards to the sister city. It's okay for the supervisors who went on those free trips to Japan, but when you did so, you're not permitted to vote on anything else regarding the sister city. So just wanted to give you a heads up. If anything else is missing on your 700 forms, I suggest you fix it now. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll close the public comment period and ask Jay to elaborate on something else that he's been doing.
Perhaps we could take a short break?
Okay, we'll recess until 10:35. I apologize for the delays. Some of these items are timed items, and they have to be published in the paper, so we have to adhere to the times that are on that. We can't start before those items come up, so we've got a little bit of time between the next couple of items. So we're going to move on to item number 14, which is to approve and adopt an ordinance establishing permitting regulations for the development of wireless communication facilities outside the coastal zone. Designate county council to prepare a summary of the ordinance for publication and adopt a resolution adopting standards for wireless communications facility as requested by Joel.
Hi. Good morning. I'll try to make this last 20 minutes.
Please do. Boris.
A while back, we were approached by a telecommunications company that wants to site small cell or wireless communication facilities in our right-of-way. They presented us with a little agreement to do that. It's basically like they'd be conditions to an encroachment permit. That didn't really offer us the kind of control over the aesthetics and the siting that most jurisdictions like to exercise. So we started exploring an ordinance. And what we've come up with is a very simple ordinance that creates an administrative permit to go along with the encroachment permit and the building permit. And there's an attached resolution that has design criteria, color, blending in, height, things like that. So I'll go through it a little bit and explain what I'm talking about. So what we're talking about is this thing up here and this box associated with it. So in 1996, the federal government passed the Telecommunications Act and basically preempted most of the field of telecommunications and wireless internet providers. So while we can regulate it to some extent, we can't prohibit it or pass any law that has the effect of prohibiting it, and we can't regulate the radio frequency emissions that come out of those things. And so we have to allow it. Short of that, we can exercise some sort of control about where and when and how. But we're further limited by state law that says that in our public right-of-ways, we have to allow telephone companies to use our space so long as they don't incommode the public use. So for a long time, that was pretty much anything other than blocking people's traffic. They could have free access. A couple years ago, there's a case that says that being really ugly incommodes the public use of highways because driving and the scenic resources of a highway are as important as anything else. So that opened up a lot of aesthetic regulation for local governments, and that is essentially what we are trying to do here. Is have some small, modest ability to say where, within a block, the distance from other poles, the distance from corners, the noise that they can emit, I think is in there, making them blend in. We have prescribed 3 different colors that we can make them do in there, so it'll be fairly standard. This kind of foothold of control can be expanded later as the law develops, as the community reacts to these things as they come in. But we're also a community that kind of needs as much telecommunications equipment as possible, so this is a very, very modest ordinance. We looked around at a lot of jurisdictions, and this is, I think, the simplest one we found. Some, like San Diego's, are hundreds of pages long and very complicated and very expensive. This will be a $200 administrative permit fee, plus whatever an encroachment and building permit costs. And then there's a $270 recurring fee that the FCC says is presumptively reasonable. And the companies are pretty excited to pay only that much every year. So we will generate a little revenue off of this, enough to cover our costs for inspecting and citing and reviewing the design and checking up on them. So what the options are is to have them on existing lights or to put in lights and have them on there, to put them on existing utility poles, to put them on traffic signals, or to put them on what they call monopoles, which is just a pole for no other purpose than to have these. There's one on a utility pole. There's one on a light. There's another two on lights. This is the same light with and without. You can see that it adds height, and it's fairly big. I mean, they're not beautiful. And here's a monopole. There's a pole that's just put in there for no other reason than to have this thing on it. And they can be kind of ugly. So that's really the whole presentation. If you want, I can talk about what a small cell is and the frequencies, and 5G in the future, but only if you want to know.
Is there, and just in my curiosity, a range? What's the range of these? Does that depend on the height? Does that depend on the?
Their range is very small. It's about 1,000 feet, from what I understand. And so they have to be able to sight them pretty close to each other. And there's only like maybe a 50-foot kind of range where they can move them around. So we have a limited ability to tell them where they can put them because any overregulation of that can effectively make the network not work, and then we've violated the federal law.
Sure.
So these are, high-frequency waves that lose energy fast. So while a lot of information can be transmitted, through eventually 5G, the range is low. So you have to put them all over. What this batch is, the company that wants to do them now, I think it's just boosting the existing services. It's not 5G yet. I don't know if 5G is coming to Crescent City anytime soon. That one is kind of controversial. People are a little bit up in arms about it in some places. But that is a very specific preemption from federal law. The radio frequency emissions are nothing we can control.
So if they're thinking about putting these on a single standing pole, that's not anything that we can keep them from doing?
We can dictate, so that they'd actually offered to do, this company, is to put them on streetlights. So they'd build us a streetlight and put it on there.
Okay, that was what I was getting to. Yeah.
The issue then is, do we want a streetlight in a place that's otherwise dark? It's light pollution. Some people like their dark rural streets. So that's kind of in our discretion to decide. What would be kind of optimal would be to have them co-locate on existing poles, but we don't own those Pacific Power poles, and we can't make Pacific Power let them. So the conversations I've had with the company was, can you co-locate? And it was, some of them were talking about it, but others we know we can't. And so that's, some of them might end up being co-located.
Yeah, I know in my district I've had constituents request to have light poles put up. So I wonder if there's some way that we could get together and find out where they want to put the poles and where constituents may want to have lighting.
I have a map that they shared with me of where they want to put them. I didn't bring it into this conversation because it's pretty specific to the future permits that they'll apply for, but I know where they are, and they are largely in kind of commercially areas, but there's some in the Birch Track, and there's one on North Crest, I think pretty close to the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay.
And so
Good.
this is, I think, probably a first wave. We kind of want to have some uniform idea of how we're going to deal with these. If it is going to be streetlights, we could end up with a really haphazard arrangement of different looking streetlights in strange places. But we might end up with a haphazard group of monopoles too. So
Right.
It's hard to make a consistent plan for a whole community when we have both limited authority and a limited kind of economic push. If you're San Diego, you can say, okay, everybody's coming in and they're building these things, and we have leverage, and we can have a uniform plan, and we can make them all look like palm trees if we want. We don't have that same luxury.
We don't have many palm trees.
We don't have any palm
They
trees.
would look out of place if we put a bunch of palm trees.
I have a palm tree in my yard, and I hate it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
some questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Joel, the ordinance doesn't specify the type of communication device that you're discussing today. It's more simplified than that. My concern, as I recall, and I'll ask Ms. Kunstler to maybe come up and address this, is back when I served on the Planning Commission, we had a similar type debate with cell tower placement and aesthetics that the county's ordinance did not cover back in the day, which is more specifically creating that more appealing look, placement of branches or tree-type materials on these structures, so they would blend in more with the unique environment that we have up here. I'm not seeing, other than at staff's discretion within this ordinance, addressing the discretionary look aesthetics of these proposed facilities, whether it's one of these type of towers or whether it's a larger tower, which would have that type of broad-based reach for communication purposes. Could we address that within this ordinance?
So what's in the standards in the resolution is more detail on that, but it still is fairly broad. To try to pinpoint exactly what everybody should do in every circumstance is hard. And so leaving that to the discretion of staff to say, well, it has to blend in on this spot, it has to be the same color as whatever you're putting it on, or size or height or things like that. It's easier to do with that discretion case by case rather than have a blanket rule that requires a lot of thinking ahead and then leaves us constricted when we actually want to just negotiate later. So I think the standards are fairly simple, which leaves more discretion. The more complex the standards, the less discretion there are. What a lot of places do, like San Diego, has pictures in their standards of here are some acceptable things, but it still comes down to a negotiation at the time between the telecommunications company and the county.
Then I would really strongly recommend, if we're going to leave this to the discretion of staff, that the policy of that department be clearly outlined about the board's wishes to address some of the aesthetic nature of having the communication device hidden to the best of its ability. And especially if that device is being sited within the forest, that device be blended as best possible. We've, for far too long, bypassed this type of look for our cell towers in this community. I'd like to see that addressed in some way, shape, or form.
We can do that. Cell towers are kind of a different animal. These are things that are going in our rights of way, or on private property with a use permit. And once you're in use permit land, you're in broad discretion land too. We don't have that in commode language. It's just down to the federal law. One of the issues, like, we could just make this a public process where the board could weigh in on every single one, except that federal law gives us a shot clock of 60 days. We don't rule on these things or issue a permit or deny a permit in 60 days. It's presumptively granted at whatever they want. And when we deny it, we have to have, in writing, substantial evidence to support that. So we basically have to create the record they're going to appeal if we want to say no to these things. And so it's going to come down, I think, a lot of times to these staff determinations where we look at it and say, well, what can we fight over? What's worth it? What do we have time for? What do we have the resources to even do? And so while the department can definitely adopt policies and the board can see them about the intention or the policy goals around these things, I do think it's a good idea to keep a lot of discretion so we don't get stuck. If that makes sense.
Board members?
I guess all I'm picturing, I get Supervisor Howard's thinking forest, and I'm thinking open beach, and what's going to happen along Pebble Beach Drive.
So the other
having
wrinkle
these-
to this, sorry,
Palm trees. There you go.
we wrote an ordinance that applied everywhere, and when the Coastal Commission saw it on the Planning Commission agenda, they objected, yes. And they want to certify it, even though, this is not really the kind of thing that I generally would consider, part of their authority. They disagree. We're going to figure that out. In the meantime, the Planning Commission's recommendation was to just restrict it to non-coastal, and so you're actually looking at the Planning Commission's recommended change in this ordinance. And so what's funny about the Coastal Commission is that they really would rather us not have an ordinance than have one that we could restrict things with. So right now, if somebody applies in the coastal zone, in the right-of-way, and we have no standards, all we really have is a building permit or an encroachment permit, and we have to say yes to them. It could look as ugly as they want, and the standards that we want to impose are going to get tied up in coastal for who knows how long, and it's just like we are federally preempted from saying no to these things.
So, did you recently go to coastal? Because, I mean, my understanding with the whole new direction of Coastal Commission is that they're going to work closely with each county and each area and look at us differently. So, and I'm hearing from you, that is not what you got from them.
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by working closely, right? They want to work so closely with us that we can't.
Okay, but to understand that they're going to shoot us in the foot. And I can say not all of Pebble Beach Drive is in the Coastal Commission. Where I'm at isn't Coastal Commission,
That's right.
you know? So,
So Pebble Beach Drive has underground wiring, right? But you can't underground these things. They won't work.
right, so we're going to have these,
Yeah,
then are
you're-
you going to go to streetlights? I mean, what are you going to do?
That would be an interesting thing. I don't know, we haven't talked about that, but probably not streetlights, I'm guessing.
Because they stop at Condor where the city stops, and then there's no more.
Those would be things that we would probably try to glean the community's wishes and not make anybody upset. But yeah, I mean, light pollution is a real thing, especially in rural places where we have the benefit of dark skies a lot of the times. So
Right.
Especially during the day. Light
Yeah.
pollution. We get a lot of it.
a lot of it.
So, Joel, I'm interested in how this would affect the outlying areas like Klamath, which is also on the reservation.
Well, if it's on trust land or land owned by a tribal member, we don't have civil regulatory jurisdiction. Otherwise, we do. So it kind of comes down to the usual haphazard manner of regulating land on reservations. That is, this is kind of like a base ordinance that we kind of have our foot in the door and can amend as we go, because we can't foresee kind of what the development's going to look like. Right now, the one company that's talking to us has been pretty amenable, not only to wait for us to figure this out, but to kind of pay whatever we want and to make them look like whatever we want. These pictures all came from them. These are their design options. And so, I think once we kind of have a basic process, we can fine tune it over time and we can adjust it as new things present themselves. But anticipating everything that could happen is pretty difficult.
Joel, I have a question for you, followed by a secondary question. Have we identified all the dead spots in the county? And
I haven't.
Has there, the second part of that question is, with a 1,000-foot range, which I guess about a quarter of a mile, how many poles and devices would we need to fully service the needs where we're not on the cell phone and all of a sudden it goes dead? I hear different answers to what is a dead area, and it changes. Is that a figure that, an area, geographical area that changes with the, I'm not familiar with the technology. Can you identify any of this?
That's beyond my knowledge.
That's not what we're talking about here.
No. I
Well,
know.
it's
But
an
how many-
interesting, so the basic premise, as I understand it, my very lay view of the science of wireless technology, is we have, cell towers and they have dead spots sometimes because of the geography, but they also, there's a difference between the range and kind of the capacity. So you could be within range, but there's just too many people using too much data. And so these small cell facilities might not merely extend the range or fix dead spots. They might add capacity to what you can kind of do on your phone in the area. And those are all things that are pretty squarely kind of within the marketplace, market forces for those
Okay, thank you.
cell companies.
Okay, I would, any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd still like to hear from staff of community development on something that addresses the concern that I've just raised, specific to a policy that could address the aesthetics that would outlast maybe the tenure of an individual's retirement, and
guess-
how that could be addressed moving forward.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. Are you talking about the cellular towers?
Yes.
Those are not going to be handled any differently than they currently are, in that they require a use permit and they go to the planning commission.
And the planning commission at that point has the discretion to work presumably with staff, or staff has the discretion to make a cell tower, which this ordinance doesn't clarify whether it's one of these micro towers or one of these larger towers.
It's my understanding these are just for those smaller micro towers.
Well,
This isn't for the
I'm reading
other.
this ordinance, and it does not address the specifics of the type of tower. It's an ordinance that specifically addresses telecommunications from wireless. I don't see any specifics outlined in here, as I have read it. So what I'm trying to ask right now is if a policy could be created that allows for the discretion that's presumed on staff to make about the placement of these towers and their looks. If it does apply to these larger towers, which I believe it does based on this ordinance, can the aesthetics be addressed? So in the future, when these large towers are sited, which this ordinance presumably does address, and Joel could clarify for me, that staff could ask for those towers to blend in with the environment with some kind of look. If a policy could address that within CDD, then that's what I would recommend, and I'd
Okay.
let the ordinance stand as is.
Okay, it was just my confusion is I thought it only applied to the small cell, not to the
Well,
larger towers.
Joel, please clarify if it does or doesn't.
It could apply to a large tower if one were going in our right-of-way, but they won't be. We're talking about things that are fitting in the right-of-way. So wireless communications facility is a term of art, it's defined, and it could include a large tower, except that the regulations, these design standards we have in here wouldn't address those. If we tried to apply them to that, we would get absurd results because they wouldn't function. They'd be too small, they'd be the wrong shape, they'd be attached to telephone poles. So the use permit process that has always been the case is still going to be the case. So nothing related to large cell towers on private property with use permits is changing through this ordinance.
Okay, so I guess my question, Mr. Chair, sorry for the lengthy conversation, but I know you wanted to extend the meeting.
Yes.
I
just didn't think it was going to be
would
this
the
particular
county
item.
need a specific ordinance to impact the use permit process, that if a communication tower was sited outside the county's right-of-way, i.e. on private land, what policy or what ordinance, what can the county do to better dictate the aesthetics if it's not addressed in this current ordinance before us?
Well, we can look more closely at that, and if there are maybe FCC orders on that I'm not aware of. But basically, the county doesn't have architectural review standards for any buildings, which we could. We could delve deeply into that if that's the board's desire. If you want just architectural review for cell towers, that's something we can kick around. That's kind of beyond the scope of anything we were considering, but it's not off the table.
Well, it's a longer discussion, Mr. Chairman, than what I think is before us today with this ordinance, but it's something that this community should consider moving forward in the future, whether it's an architectural standard or whether it's a placement of cell tower to blend in with the aesthetics of our environment. It's probably long overdue for being addressed here, and it's something I've thought about from a planning commission standpoint when I served on the planning commission well over 15 years ago, and I'd love to see it addressed at some point. So I'd ask for some discussion from staff after we make the determination on this decision to think about this piece in the future. Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion at this time to approve and adopt an ordinance establish permitting regulations for the development of wireless communication facilities outside the coastal zone. Designate county council to prepare a summary of the ordinance for publication, and adopt resolution adopting design standards for wireless communication facilities.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment?
If I can make it. Linda Sutter, yes, please. I've seen the cell towers that look like trees in Medford and in Sacramento. And I certainly thought all those pictures that were displayed were ugly. You don't want your town to look any more than ugly than it already is. And, I mean, we look like we're from the 60s. And that's about it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion? Kylie, would you poll a vote, please?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, moving on to our item number 15, 1055 item. We're going to approve and adopt an ordinance amending the regulations for commercial cannabis retail and manufacturing within the coastal zone, and an ordinance amending regulations for commercial cannabis and retail manufacturing activity outside the coastal zone, and designate county council to prepare a summary of the ordinance for publication. Joel?
Thank you. So this is back with the changes that the board directed us to go explore back in September. And so we took the cannabis business combining district that was already in the Crescent City urban boundary, applied it to Smith River, and changed the setbacks. And so here is the map. It's really small. That has the legend on it, and you can see that's the different commercial and CR and the things. This is the same map, bigger, but without the legend. I had to cut it off. These red circles are now 600 feet instead of 1,000. And you can see this little green spot right here is our one currently permitted and operating retail operation. This is another one that there's a county use permit for, but there is not a state license, so it's kind of like dormant, but it's on the map. So, with the 600-foot setback from schools, you can see that this is the juvenile hall parcel. That is now no longer an issue. And then the board gave us direction on distance between retailers to just come up with something that staff thought was reasonable. The Environmental Review Committee suggested 200 feet between retailers on the same street frontage. So that's the little green circle around the little green dot. So you can imagine all of this commercial property here that would have had a big circle around it when it was 1,000 feet is now available for use. I think that's kind of the primary effect of this ordinance in this area, is that this can stay and that other retailers can operate, at least in this area. The dark shaded is the city, and they're working on an ordinance right now. And then this kind of green shade is the coastal zone, and so they never have certified our ordinance yet, and this is a coastal ordinance. We'll have to package it and send it back soon, and hopefully that can then open up some land down here. Here is the Smith River Community Services District boundary that we're using to put the combined district on. And so you can see this light pink is commercial recreation. We're adding to the district, and then the purple here is M, and the red is normal commercial. The coastal zone cuts in down here, and so at least for this part here, it's not an issue. Here's a bigger map of the top part. This is, I think, the Hoanquet School. The rest of this is, just kind of open CR. Here's the town site. This is the school right here, and so none of this affects it. So there's a fair amount of open space there. And that's that.
Mr.
This
Chairman?
is pretty much all stuff we've talked about before, so.
Joel, could you return to the slide of the city limits but blown up, please?
The city blown up?
One of the issues that was raised during our past discussion was what qualifies as a school. There's been some debate about the location off of Washington, not Washington Boulevard, but beyond Washington Boulevard off of Northcrest. I see you have a point on this map that shows that location as being a school, yet there's been some contention about it. Has your office done anything to better define the definition of school?
We're treating school pretty broadly. You know, we think that the juvenile hall was maybe a wobbler in the sense that it wasn't probably what the legislature intended when it meant school. But rather than, you know, take the position that it's not a school, we kind of did all of this to avoid the issue. We'd like to treat school as broadly. The state law just says school. It says a school providing K through 12. And so it's our understanding that that is a school there at the church. The way these things would work, though, is if an applicant applies, you know, they'd have an opportunity to contest or prove that it is or isn't a school. You know, I don't know, especially because not all schools are public schools. You know, it can't be something that we necessarily are, you know, have a solid legal opinion on a map of these are all the schools. It's going to be a case-by-case basis, and a school is going to have the ability to show up and say, we are a school, or we aren't a school, or the applicant will have the same thing. So that is, you know, we circle the things that we've been able to identify that we think are schools. I think a school is a school, whether it's accredited or whether it's private. The only limitation is specifically home schools. If it only happens inside of a residence, that doesn't make the list.
Thank you, Joel.
Joel, a quick question with regard to, this is a two-pronged ordinance, one reducing from 1,000 down to 600 feet, correct?
Correct.
What about talk to us about this 200-foot between stores ordinance, and they're not separatable, they're inseparable, the way you presented them there's two issues here.
If the board would like to do one without the other, it would have to go back to the planning commission.
I'm sorry.
If the board would like to do one without the other, it would have to go back to the planning commission to be looked at again. What the planning commission recommended was to do the Smith River expansion with no setback reduction for schools or between the retailers. And so I didn't bring that forward to vote on, so we don't have these two different competing things. And since the direction the board has given in the past is consistent with this and not that, if the board wants to consider that planning commission one, we'll just bring it back. We'll actually write that ordinance, which we haven't done yet, and then we'll bring it back. But this is, the 200 feet is the recommendation of the ERC. It's a logical one. The kind of complaint or the criticism that we've gotten is that we accidentally created a monopoly for one business because those setbacks really made it so whoever was there first was going to be the only one. So reducing that down to 200 allows other businesses to operate in that space. So I think it is kind of consistent with troubleshooting the ordinance that we wrote that had the kind of unintended consequences because we hadn't really.
I appreciate what
You'll
you're
see on
saying
that.
with regard to the creating a monopoly, but what does it do with the 200-foot? What is now the potential of, could you have a little community of stores within an arm's throw of each other?
You could.
2,
So
3, 4, 5, 6 of them in one area?
It's
cluster?
only 200 feet on the same street frontage. So once you turn the corner, it kind of resets. So they could technically be 50 feet as the crow flies, but they're on different streets. The goal wasn't to, I mean, I'm gleaning from the ERC, the goal wasn't to create a mini community, but nor was it to space them out too much because we're working in this little space. And so there's kind of a balance between, you don't want a strip mall of nothing but cannabis operations, but, it was the direction of the board to expand to allow more businesses to come in. So 200 feet is a fairly arbitrary number that I think seemed reasonable to the ERC, and we thought it was a good idea.
Anybody got anything else? Bob, Lori?
No.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
Morning. Pardon me. Jesse Davis. I think these changes that staff has come up with are good ones. I think it will function well for the design purpose of opening up a little bit more space. I think the fear of having a huge number of stores all together is, I don't think that can happen. I think the economics of things, that can't happen. It's really expensive to open a store. It's a pretty small community, so you're not going to see a big explosion of it. I don't think it's going to affect the community in any negative way. I think it's a good move, makes sense. These are the baby steps we were talking about during the working group days, starting in a restricted way and moving slowly. It's been over a year. I kind of want to talk about this in relation to the Planning Commission. It'd be nice if the Planning Commission is kind of defined to be like representative of the community in some way, theoretically. And, you know, as appointees, a reflection of the board in some way. And I think the Planning Commission probably, it's like kind of this untapped community resource, it seems like, even though it's kind of low paid maybe for the input that you could put into. I heard they get $100 a meeting, which if it was just for time sitting at the meeting, that's good money, but for the amount of time that you need to put into making good policy decisions, it is like a zero. You know, I know about volunteering time for policy creation. So I just, you know, there's a way to maybe to define the role of the Planning Commission a little more clearly so that everybody on board knows what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. And then we could have a little more progress here in the community via the Planning Commission and have them be on board with what the community wants and with what the board wants and move things along more speedily. I think that covers it. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to move to approve and adopt an ordinance amending the regulation for commercial cannabis retail and manufacturing within the coastal zone, an ordinance amending regulation for commercial cannabis retail and manufacturing activity outside the coastal zone, and designate county council to prepare a summary of the ordinance for publication.
Thank you. I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Kylie, would you poll vote?
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Okay, now we've gotten through those, and now we're running a little bit behind. We're going to have a presentation by the Visitor Bureau. Cindy?
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
No, fine. It's perfectly fine.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here. So I'm Cindy Vosberg with the Crescent City Del Norte Chamber of Commerce, Executive Director, and I'm also the Executive Director for the Visitor Bureau. So I'm here today for us to update you on the marketing efforts that we've been putting out all year for the last 9 months since we launched the new website. And I'd like to introduce you to Lynette Braylard with Lulish Designs. She is our agency of record for the VB.
Welcome, Lynette.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us, and we're very excited to present some of our numbers and successes. So I will get started. I did not bring my glasses, and now I'm like, the arrow, there we go. Okay. Oh, no. There we go. So we have included a printed piece for you because we're going to be going through some slides where we're referencing some earned media mentions. We have also included some short links where you can go in and really dig into our actual data reports, marketing reports that we provide to our committee on a quarterly basis. Because we are just covering the highlights today. So our campaign officially kicked off when our website launched last April, in April of 2019. This report is just from April 1st through the end of the year, December 31st. And we're excited, whoops, sorry, a little too quick on the trigger there. We're excited to announce some of our earned media mentions. For instance, the new Visit California guide, which is our state tourism agency, just came out. And as you can see here, one of our photos, well, not our photos, but a photo of Jedediah Smith State Park introduces the entire North Coast section. We are also running a print ad in here, but we were excited that they chose to actually recognize us this year. Part of our campaign strategy has been to initiate and foster a relationship with Visit California. And since then, we have seen writers coming down here courtesy of Visit California. So we're excited about that relationship that we started and are continuing to, coddle. So another article that came out, vacationideas.com, did 22 best things to do in Crescent City. That was recently in January. Also, ABC has a segment called Bartell's Backroads, where our region was mentioned as one of the top 15 places in Northern California. The video segment, there was a bunch of different segments, but one of them includes a highlight on Battery Point Lighthouse, and then the other, the drive-through Klamath Tree. And then also Photos Travel featured us as one of the area's spookiest, scariest towns in America. And what was really exciting is they actually led with the Battery Point Lighthouse photo at the top, and then have a whole segment on Battery Point Lighthouse further in the article. Here, I just wanted to include a couple of our campaign. This is paid. We did this website, Weekend Sherpa, is focused on out of San Francisco Bay Area in LA, and it's for outdoor enthusiasts. So we ran a comprehensive banner ad and articles and email newsletter marketing to their audience. And these are just some examples of some of the things we were promoting. And then here's just an example of one of our print ads, so you can just see what our campaign looks like. So overall, our marketing campaign includes digital media buys, print media buys. We do a lot of content and search marketing, and that's specifically for our website, visitdelnortcounty.com, where we focus on a lot of search engine optimization. We do social media marketing, public relations, email marketing, and we have developed an owned photo library, hence where we can give these publications and writers looking for photos, our photos. And then, of course, creative and design services. Part of one of the organizations that we work closely with, North Coast Tourism Council, which includes Mendocino County, Lake County, Humboldt, and Del Norte. Part of our membership and being on the board with them, we are participating in several travel and tourism trade shows here in the upcoming months. And that's a list of them. The Bay Area Travel and Adventure Show, we will also be going. I will personally be at the Go West Summit in Portland representing us, and then also IPW in Vegas. So again, these shows put us in, there are writers and tour operators and then also consumers looking for more information. So we'll be there promoting our county. So to date, we have had over 1,750,000 paid campaign media impressions. And then I just wanted to explain real briefly how we look at it. Everything we do, we drive everything to the website. And on the website, we have every single tourism-related business in town, every single hotel, motel, B&B, every single restaurant, and all of that. So we call this the tourism marketing engine, that we're driving people to the website, and from the website, all of our members of our community involved in tourism, including an event calendar, is all represented there. So in all of our marketing and everything we do, we measure our success with several key performance indicators. We feel it's really important. We look at lodging tax collections and what those are doing, website traffic and social media engagement, referral traffic from visitdelnortcounty.com to our stakeholder websites, so to all the businesses around the region, paid conversion tracking in all of our digital media, and lead generation and visitor center traffic. And we're really excited. This is a comparison of our visitor package requests for information from 2018 to 2019. We have made huge performances in that, great leaps and bounds, and that's growing quite quickly. It's crazy to see January's numbers already. So also lead generation from our marketing. We have over 800 email opt-in subscribers now, and we have kicked off our email newsletter in January. That went out to those subscribers. The website requests for visitor guides, we had 614 to date. And then also, we're getting direct leads from Visit California now. And then what's really exciting, room tax collections. So since we kicked off April 1st, for that fourth quarter, we saw an 8% increase. We saw a 10% increase in Q1 and a 10% increase in Q2. So we're excited to see this. And we did pull out the Harbor District tax collections from these numbers that you're seeing here. But yeah, we're excited to see that this is one of our main our key performance indicators. So some of our paid media buys, just wanted to go over really quick. We focus on Visit California, Google, of course, because that's the #1 search engine and where people go to look for information. Instagram, Facebook, the North Coast Tourism Council website, we are constantly feeding new content and information there. And then, of course, the 101 Things to Do guide. And just so you know who we're targeting, who we're trying to bring here, adults 25 to 64 and up who are interested in outdoor recreation, who are outdoor enthusiasts, they want to hike trails, go to beaches, and all of that. Our target markets are the San Francisco Bay Area, the Oregon I-5 corridor, Portland, Salem, and Eugene, but we do market to Bend since their population has they're very outdoor and big outdoor enthusiast population that likes to come here. Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, and then of course Washington, the Seattle metro area we market to, and British Columbia, Canada. So to date in this reporting period, we've had over 22,000 website visits, over 38,000 page views, and we've received 237,000 impressions from organic search. And organic, just to define that, that is AKA free, not paid. A majority, our website visitors are coming from California, Oregon, Canada, Washington, Texas, Virginia, and Illinois. So for our social media marketing, we've had over 331,000 impressions, and that's a mix of paid and organic. Again, we do a lot of paid social media marketing. Because that's how your ad gets seen nowadays, but then we still do organic as well. We've had over 14,000 engagements, which means somebody liked, commented, or shared a post that we put up. And we've had almost 3,500 click-throughs to our website. And that is it. And we are here to answer any questions you might have.
Lynette, thanks you. That's some pretty exciting stuff going on. Very impressive. Board members, any questions?
Yeah,
Comments?
Lynette,
Chris?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please be sorry. Mr. Howard?
This subject's always been near and dear to my heart. I really appreciate the report given on the update of the county's contribution, essentially, that goes into the Visitors Bureau. Measurements, as you've outlined very clearly in this report, are the most important aspect of seeing that ROI, that return on investment that the county needs to see in order to continue that investment in the future. And the growth rates that we've seen and those items that you're tracking, specifically TOT and others, has been off the charts pretty much since the investment was made back in 2006 to invest in a Visitors Bureau in this community going forward. Arguably, tourism is going to be one of our key drivers moving forward in the future, and it's been specifically outlined in our community economic development strategy that was launched in draft and hopefully will be approved by the end of this month by the county board and also the city council. But tourism, outlined in the word team, has been specifically highlighted as one of those areas of focus. I think it's critical that the Visitors Bureau, led by the Chamber of Commerce and those participating, continue to seek additional revenues as you guys increase this ROI picture. If we are truly seeing by quarter 8 to 10% growth rates, there's no reason that additional revenue to more broadly market this area, especially in California, since 45% of your travel appears to be coming from the state of California. That would reflect also on Sam Handelman's ideas when he evaluated this originally in 2005, that 300-foot radius circle around this community as a dot is your most effective area to campaign for those short trips. And I've heard, as I heard in the candidates forum last night, those short trips to the cool coast out of those hot regions inland is one of those larger drivers, and I'm glad to see those pieces being driven not only to this website but our community where they spend those hard-earned dollars.
Yes, first of all, Lynette, nice to meet you. Cindy, great job. Are you doing any international outreach? It seems I'm meeting more and more people from Australia, New Zealand, on the beach. I live down at Battery Point, as you know, the UK, lots of Europeans. I didn't hear that in the report that you're doing any outreach. Can you address that?
Sure. Sure.
So I'm going to go ahead and answer that. Supervisor Gitlin, I know from your time that you spent on the Chamber Board and on the Visitor Bureau as well, that you're familiar with the North Coast Tourism Council. So our partnership with the North Coast Tourism Partnership is very much geared to the international travel. So when we go to these travel, the Portland show, the San Francisco show, what we're running in Las Vegas, we're actually presenting to a lot of international tour guides. So we recently just, in September, we had a German writer here that Lynette set up. We put her at Scopa. She ate here in town. She did a float down the Smith River, and she toured all up through Northern California. And the feedback that we got on that is that our area was the area that she enjoyed the most, and so she's writing now. So in answer to your question, we don't have funding with the money that we get now to do direct marketing to the international groups, but what we can do is team up with the North Coast Tourism and Visit California, who gives us grants for the international travel marketing, but we can't do it alone, so we do it as groups.
Well, thank you, Cindy, for addressing that, but I know you know some years back there was a group of French writers who came here.
Because we worked on it together.
That's right.
Yes.
And is that a possibility we can reinvent that and encourage other groups like that from overseas to come in? And I know we hosted an event there.
Right.
And it was very successful from what I understand.
So that's exactly what the German writer was, how we obtained her. And so we work with Visit California, who is focused, they have a $100 million now budget. Isn't that right? So I believe it's a lot of money, and they're targeting international travel. So by us, You know, it's taken us a long time to form that relationship with Visit California, but we now have that relationship where they know who we are, they can call us, you know, we can recognize each other's voices, and that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our dollars, is through Visit California.
In fact, I just want to add, one of the publications that came out was, it's called Autocar India, came here. And actually, interestingly enough, after those, it's a full article. They're kind of like the AAA of India. And that was, again, through Visit California. But they came here and they drove through our region. And of course, we got mentioned in a printed article as well as a video that they have on YouTube that has millions of viewers. And already it was interesting to see that when I was looking at website stats currently, that India now is the #2 country as far as traffic coming to our website. So we are making dents in international, but with the assistance of Visit California and the North Coast Tourism Council, because we don't have the budget. So, yeah.
So if I could just add just a couple things, and then I know that you guys have other things on the agenda. Of this whole report, what really stands out is, and it's a very small item, and that is the request for information through the website and through Visit California. We received this year over 800 requests from people who read articles on Visit California in Visit California publications, and they took the action to actually ask us for more information, to send them a vacation package. The other thing is through the website. When we come back in 3 months and give you the next update, we then will have a full year on the new website, and Lynette will be able to track for us from that point on, year over year. But to see our visitor requests go up like they have, those are people that have to take an action to get more information from us, and that are planning on coming to this area in the next few months or the next year. So that's, you know, it's a small piece of the picture, but it's a huge success. Thank you, Lynette.
Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you. You know, as a former director, basically executive director of the Visitor Bureau, I know how hard you guys have worked, especially since 2006. So it's really important. But I think what we really need to concentrate on is our area as a major destination point, and offer those people that are coming here different kinds of experiences so that they will stay one more day. All right, and that's really important. I think maybe a major area of concentration should be more of an outreach to the bus tours, so that those bus tours will learn of us, and it gives them even more impetus to sell their tours to people. So instead of normal Portland or Medford or these kinds of areas, you know, talk about our cool coast. And the other thing that was successful when I was running this thing was that we would market to those people inland areas on hot days. When you're in 105-degree temperature in Redding, you want to cool off. And by sponsoring the weather, so you say, well, the temperature in Medford today is 105, but it's a cool 69 in Crescent City. Those are the kinds of things that will sell people and give us an impetus for them to come over here to the cool coast. But they really need some activities to be able to stay here that one more day. So I thank you for a great presentation. You're doing a great job.
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate all the work you've put into this.
Vice Chair Cowan, anything?
Well, I just want to say thanks for coming out. It's always great to see you, Lynette. It's been a pleasure working with you and your company over the last couple of years. And I feel like we finally have gotten to that point. You know, that first year was just kind of setting up and then starting, and then, you know, now it's all coming to fruition, and we're seeing the rewards, reaping the rewards of all the hard work that you've done. And I just want to say I appreciate you and the work you've done. Thanks.
Yeah, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I like I like the fact that you brought in the lighthouse as well as the drive-through tree in Klamath. I mean, that's a huge distance apart, and we're often seen as not thinking about Klamath or thinking about Gasky or thinking about Smith River, and it's nice to see that's been pulled together a little bit. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to highlight a couple things that were discussed by Lynette and Cindy. The effort specifically with Visit California, Carolyn Batetta, Ryan Becker, those efforts have been driven for quite some time with those individuals, and more importantly with focus on Crescent City and Del Norte County. Those efforts, I think, you're now seeing fruit bared, where name recognition, more importantly developed by relations, which is always important, gets that push that we need for this small little community and our small little budget. My hope is that you could kind of address some of the push now that we potentially may see from the 2020 campaign that we've launched going for gold, and the money that's been received and actually contributed to by the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors. What's your perception on that campaign? Are we going to have an opportunity to hear about that here in the near future? Can you speak towards that a little?
So we're actually have a meeting set for tomorrow where Jay and two of the supervisors are invited to as a funding update, or an update to our funding partners, and that's at 2:30 at the Washington Fire Hall. I believe that one of you supervisors are attending, and I was told that the other one wasn't able to make it.
Yeah, I think it's me, and I think Chris is on, couldn't make it.
So what we'll do is make sure that you get a copy of that presentation. We have some really exciting things to report on. We've started, the scope of work. Rob, the consultant, has done a real good job. And I think what Rob has done best is has pulled together a fantastic team of professionals to help us accomplish that scope of work. Lynette is one of them. Lynette's scope is she'll be handling the media kit and the website. There are 3 other people on the team, and then a HR firm out of Minnesota. PR firm, sorry, that has done a tremendous job on what they're proposing as the scope of work.
Yes.
And so that will be tomorrow. Chris, if you won't be there, we'll make sure you get a copy of that.
I would encourage a similar type presentation to the board. It's when these type of investments are made of public dollars, it's always important to show that to more than just the board members, but also to the community. And the presentation you gave today really does a lot to justify those investments. And so I'd encourage, maybe when the time is right, to bring an item like that back to the agenda to show the benefit of what arguably may be the biggest campaign to generate earned income for this community that this community has seen in its lifetime.
We will do that. We will do that. Lori, I had the pleasure of sitting next to her last week at the Last Chance grade meeting. And so she made a comment that I repeated to Lynette yesterday, and that is she had suggested to Jamie with Caltrans, or the consultant, that he do his book tour. And I see, that just says it all, that we, both with this report, next week we see the harbor and the city, and the Talawa has asked for me to come give this report to them as well, and we'll do the same with the Go for the Gold. Excellent. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate the presentation.
We have a couple of these magazines that we're going to leave here for you.
Okay, thank you. Kylie, did I get everything?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is February 25th. Thank you all. Yeah, it'll stretch it a little.